welcome back to another episode of Fintech Focus TV with me, Toby. Today we are doing something new and exciting and fresh on the show. We were approached recently by the team over at Kepler Cheuvreux because they've been doing some incredible work and some really exciting things in the tech area, and said, look, can we get a bit of time on the show to talk through that process? And absolutely, it's something which we've been looking to do and to share new and exciting things that are happening in the space. I am delighted to bring to you today Jeff Perreton from Kepler Cheuvreux, and he is accompanied by Arjun Narayan from Materialize. How are you both?
I'm pretty good. Thanks to Toby for having us.
Thank you so much.
Listen, it's great to have you both on. I've been talking to both of you now for a couple of weeks and hearing about some of the incredible things that you've been doing. Before we get into that, can I ask you both to introduce yourself? Arjun, can you kick us off and tell us a little bit about Materialize and the business?
Thanks very much, Toby. I'm Arjun Narayan. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Materialize. Materialize is building a streaming database that allows you to write complex queries that run on top of streaming or real-time data. We believe that every business needs to become a real-time business, but that future is limited by current approaches that require compromises between spending lots of money building custom applications, the cost of compute that can react on such low latencies, and the skills that you need to build these applications. Materialize makes it very simple for businesses to just write standard SQL queries the way they've been doing for decades and decades. So the learning curve is not high. And they can write complex queries and build these intelligent applications that react in real time.
Fantastic. It's an area there which we've seen a lot of noise about over the last years, and it's probably one of those sort of hot areas that we're talking about. But again, what I love about what you just said there is taking relatively complex problems at various stages and simplifying. I'm sure we'll come on to that a little bit later on as well. Jeff, tell us a little about yourself and Kepler.
Yeah, so I'm Jean-Francois Perreton. I'm the head of Algo Quant for Kepler Cheuvreux. I've been involved with algos for pretty much the past 15 years in different shops, including the bigger shops like JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, and Barclays. I joined 4 years ago as the head of Algo Quant at Kepler. And so I've been involved with essentially redesigning our agency trading algorithm platforms. So we offer a set of agency algos to our clients, which they use to access the market and execute their orders according to some predefined strategies. And naturally, we're big consumer and producers of a massive amount of data, which comes in real time, which is why we ended up taking a look at Materialize in the first place.
Let's talk about that a little bit more. So you guys have been at the forefront of innovation within the sector, and I know how important tech is to you in the business. You're sat there as you say and thinking, right, we want to do more within the space. We've got an opportunity here. Tell us a little bit about how you found Materialize and why that came to be.
Essentially, we had a massive overhaul of our entire trading platform, and as part of that, I think a little bit more than 2 years ago, we redesigned our algo platform specifically, which is obviously something difficult and takes time. But since we had the chance to redesign it, we took the view that we wanted to decouple as much as possible algos from all the third-party applications. So third-party applications can be an engine that it's producing forecasts, for example. It could be some ETL jobs where you need to compute some statistics, display them on a dashboard, or export it to like a third-party database. So all these jobs, they are difficult to do if you don't have like a common middleware. And that's why we initially set out for Apache Kafka. So I think that was one of the first revolution that we introduced within our stack. It was definitely Apache Kafka. So we started pushing a lot of data to Apache Kafka, more and more. And as far as consuming that data, just message by message, that went really well. So that was a first success. Was we were able to put data in there, and we were also able to take it out, consume it, do some extra computation, and push it back into Kafka. But then we quickly found ourselves in a spot where, okay, we have all that data, it's there, but how do we make sense of it? How do we derive insights, analytics, and in real time, also as potentially in batches like end of day? And the problem we had is there is no such thing as SQL on Kafka. Or there was no such thing. This is how we started the journey of thinking, okay, we need a database. Because you cannot just go and query Kafka like you would with a regular database. So I started, exploring SQL streaming, and I did a review of dozens of technology. We tried all of them. So at some point I understood that, okay, I actually want a database, but I want it on top of Kafka. So I don't want to replicate all the data that is in Kafka into a database, because in terms of resources, it's extremely inefficient. So I started Googling, it's as simple as that. I started looking for SQL streaming, and that's how I ended up finding Materialize. I was very happy because, as I said before, we tried many other solutions. And most other solutions, they come out of distributed systems. So they actually are designed before they add the SQL layer on top. And the problem with that is that typically you only get part of SQL. Complex SQL is never going to work. So simple stuff might, and even if it does, you typically have to. You have a big overhead in terms of complexity, but because these are like distributed systems, you have clusters and Hadoop-like file systems. So once we found Materialize, we are very happy because it was proper SQL, and we actually are big users internally of Postgres already, which was one of the biggest selling point of Materialize was the fact that it offers JDBC drivers and a regular PostgreSQL facade if you want. So it directly integrates with our third-party applications, BI tools, you name it. It's really SQL. It supports like advanced SQL statements, like common table expressions and things like that. So it's really nice because we don't need to learn a new language, because many other tools come with another programming language on top, which sometimes kind of is branded like SQL, but it's not SQL, or sometimes it's a completely different thing. We started playing with it, and I have to say that the product evolved quickly and got better very quickly. I mean, it wasn't bad to begin with, but initially it didn't completely fit exactly what we needed. But the team was able to evolve the product in the right direction.
There's so much I love about what you've spoken about there. One of which is, and it ties into everything we've done throughout this series when we're talking about innovative companies, both on the end user side and the vendor side. There's that important piece about working together and understanding what the problem is, and then being able to sort of tailor and bespoke that solution to what the actual issue is for the consumer, for the client. And then there's also, Arjun, something to be said for SEO and how your marketing team have been working there on Google to see that sort of thing come through, and how that there's a problem there which you're doing. You beauty parade so many different people to try and find a solution to those problems, and there it is, sat out in New York. So let's enter stage left, Arjun, here, and you've come in and provided a solution to an ongoing problem that a number of different doors were knocked on, and not being able to find the right solution for the company. Tell us a little bit about how it started for you, and what's been exciting about working with Kepler Cheuvreux here.
Yeah, so thank you, Toby. Our marketing team, maybe we're not that good at SEO because Jeff said that he did try every other solution first. So maybe we could have gotten there first. But yeah, so Materialize really is I don't want to say culmination because we're still very early in the journey, but preceding Materialize was close to a decade of long research. So my co-founder, Frank McSherry, is really one of the pioneers of stream processing and stream processing technologies, doing a lot of academic research, building an open source project called Timely Data Flow. And Materialize really is based on top of that. So Materialize as a startup is about 2.5 years old, but the technology platform is close to a decade of industrial and academic research that we build on as a base. My background before this, I was an engineer at another database startup in a slightly different market, in the transaction processing market called Cockroach Labs, building a database called CockroachDB. It's a fun name. It's a database that will survive anything. And before that, I did a PhD in distributed systems, databases, and that's where I first met Frank and came across some of his research. So I've been in the space for a very long time, and then Frank has been in the space for even longer. And one of the things sort of we bring is database expertise. But what I love working with Jeff is one of the funny things is, as much as we love to build databases, we don't use them as much. And Jeff has brought this perspective and really pushed us to, as he mentioned, we have improved over time. But part of that is because he's kept bringing new and novel sort of problems to us and pushed our thinking. One of our features that was inspired by a use case that Jeff brought to us called lateral joins is a very interesting, and I hope to get to this a little bit later. It's a very interesting SQL concept that's been around for a little bit of while that we added to Materialize somewhat recently, but we were absolutely blown away with the sort of interactive debugging or interactive problem-solving use case that they had built at Kepler. It was something that would never have occurred to us because we're just not the users and the practitioners. So we love that about working with Kepler is they really sort of improved our product with a lot of amazing feedback.
That's incredible to hear. I think the companies there that can allow you to do that are the clients who you want, right? How can you improve and grow with them? And that's the work is something I always love hearing about. I'm going to so we're set up with where we want now. We know a little bit about how the two companies have come together. I'm going to sort of pass the steering wheel over to you now, Arjun, because I want you to talk a little bit about the whole process and speak to Jeff a little bit about how this whole thing's worked through. So if I allow you to drive and pass this over here, you can turn to the questioner. I'll sit here in the background and watch in awe as you guys talk through the whole process and all the lessons and twists and turns you've taken on the journey.
Sounds good. Thanks so much. One of the things I wanted to ask Jeff, he's talked about a lot of the wonderful things that Materialize can do in terms of complex SQL and write these extremely complicated queries that react in real time. But I'd love to dig into, so I know Jeff has many use cases at Kepler that he's worked on over many months. Jeff, just pick one use case that requires complex queries.
Yeah. I'm happy to piggyback on what you just mentioned, which is the lateral join, because lateral join also exists in Postgres. But the way you answered my question with that creativity was pretty interesting, because I was struggling because a lot of systems they force on you to define in advance the SQL that you want. So SQL is pre-compiled and then that's it. And in real time, there's nothing you can change until you rebuild your application, recompile your SQL, etc. But Materialize is not like this, obviously. And what I was looking for is typically one of the workflow we have is we don't know what we're looking for. So we have an issue during the day. Maybe I found it looking at our Algo UI, or maybe I got a call from a client or through a trader. And they say, okay, this particular order is not behaving in the way we think. Then I don't know exactly what the cause of the problem is, and I don't even know what I'm looking for. So typically, what I need to do is I need to extract all the events that happen on a given order. So if you do only have Kafka, you need to stream every message from the topic, and then filter it out on your client application. So it could be your desktop, but you have to go through every single message. Probably you need to deserialize it if it's encoded in some way. So it's a lot of work, and maybe you only need like 5 messages. Maybe at the end of the day, I'm only interested in some time window or a particular pattern, and I don't necessarily know it. So what I asked, and it was really cool that we managed to interact via Slack, right? Because you guys are in the US and with EU based, we don't always completely overlap time zone wise, but it's been pretty smooth. I have to say, like every day we manage to interact with you guys. So we ask, okay, how can we interactively run SQL queries? Because we wanted to get rid of our database. Because initially what we did is we duplicated the database. So we had a connector, like the JDBC connector between Kafka and a proper Postgres database. But it was actually running out of steam, because at the end of the day, there's just too many messages and Postgres was dying. And that's why we were looking at Materialize to begin with as well. So we ask, okay, I don't know in advance what I need, but I'm going to be running some SQL queries. So the first thing I need to do is I need to pull out a particular order. How can I do that? So initially what I was doing is I was creating a Materialize view with that particular order ID. But then when I'm done looking at it, then I need to destroy it. And that's pretty troublesome. And I thought you guys could come up with something smarter. Yeah, indeed you did. So that was really cool. So that's what we did is essentially we have a list of order IDs. So we create a table in the Materialize sense, which is empty in the beginning of the day. And then we create a lateral join between that and a view we want to materialize later. So at the beginning of the day, that materialize view will be empty because it's a lateral join between something that's empty and something that's streaming. But as soon as we insert an order ID, then automatically it gets populated. I think that's fantastic because we insert the order ID, and all of a sudden we can get that data, the data we want, and we can query it, explore it until we nail down the actual query we need. Sometimes it might become a new pattern, so we can add it into a proper materialized view that will survive a restart, etc. But sometimes we just want to throw it away. And when we want to throw it away, we're also able to desubscribe by inserting like a negative row into the table. Again, that's a trick, but it really worked out well. And because we're able to do that, I managed to convince my team to just completely get rid of Postgres. And nowadays, there's no more database there. It's just Materialize and Kafka for that workflows. Yeah, I think that's amazing, actually.
That's really interesting because one of the things, so the world before Materialize, if you will, you had these traditional databases which they'd allow you to write dynamic queries. You'd come up with queries on the spot over static data where the data is not really changing. And these are your traditional OLAP data warehouses or your analytics databases. And so it's static data, dynamic queries. And then you had this world of stream processing, as Jeff was saying, where you could react to changing data. So you'd have dynamic data, but with a relatively fixed set of static queries that you had to define ahead of time. So you would essentially define these pipelines, and then you'd flow data through it at very, very high velocity, but the pipelines themselves would be very, very fixed in shape. And the missing piece was doing dynamic queries over dynamic data, which is sort of the holy grail, particularly in these debugging settings where Jeff mentioned, there's a problem ID. We don't know what the problem is. We don't even know what we want to ask. We just kind of want to poke around at it from different dimensions. And there's a human in the loop that's sort of asking interesting questions in series as they're sort of doing this detective work, if you will. And we put a lot of thought into that. And Jeff was one of our first users in really pushing the envelope there. Jeff, I'd love to also ask you a little bit. So one of the things you mentioned is the joins against this problem table that's relatively static and initially at the start of the day empty against the streams of data. Are there other use cases where you join live data with static data? And you mentioned BI tools, for instance. So
yeah,
tables and charts.
Absolutely, because we have a lot of what we call reference data. Sometimes we refer to it as static. It's not exactly static. It can change like once or twice a day, so it's not exactly static.
It's more like slowly changing dimension data.
Yes, but when it changes, you need to react. So it's not like it can be fixed all day. So that's also interesting. And I thought you guys also had a very interesting solution to that, because that data typically sits in a proper or normal Postgres database. And what you did is you recently introduced, I think it's one of the latest releases, but we have the ability to actually source from a Postgres database. So we have a source from Kafka and we have a source from Postgres, and then we're able to combine the two into a materialized view by joining data from that so-called static data, which still might change, and that change might still be reflected. So it's important that it is reflected. So I think that also is a key feature. So we populate that static data in Postgres, and whenever it changes, even for a manual reason, sometimes we have to do like a manual operation at source. We change one row or we change just one value, but because you're piggybacking on the Postgres replication, that gets streamed essentially. So you're streaming Postgres differences into Materialize, and then we can just address it just like any other stream. So it really eases our our life if you want. You don't need to have bad jobs to react and insert data to Materialize. No, that's gone. So that's, again, you're easing our lives, I would say.
I'd love to. So I'd love to dig a little bit deeper into that. Can you describe the use case?
So typically, so orders are getting market data. They do a lot of computations on market data. So they update their state, they send orders themselves. So we have this concept of parent order, which comes from the client, and street order. So we take a parent order from a client, and we are going to divide it into smaller chunks because we're trying to get a better price, and we have strategies to minimize market impact and get close to the price benchmark of the client. So in that process, we have our own models to try and time and size this order properly, to try and get the best liquidity possible during the day or throughout the day. And so the way we approach this is all that data goes to Kafka. So every decision that we take and every calculation that we make, it's going to go into a Kafka topic. And there are multiple Kafka topics essentially, but that information later needs to be combined to be able to analyze the algo performance. So there are different metrics that we look at. The number of street orders they send, the average price that we get on a particular execution. And so we're going to build those statistics in real time so that on a per order basis, we can break it down. And the way we break it down relies on a lot of static data. So for example, I'd like to break down my execution per order, but I like to aggregate on a per market basis or on some other classification that is not there in the normal Kafka topic because it's static. So I'm not going to replicate it every day. So it comes from an external source. But that information is still important for me to sort of bucket my my performance numbers and aggregate them. And that's why we need that's extra data. So we're able to do pie charts or some tables where we do some conditional averages depending on which bucket a particular order falls. So the concrete application of that is really dashboarding. So we have different kinds of dashboards. So we have dashboards for alerts. So we have Materialize View that expose problematic orders, and they get picked up by Grafana. So we're using Grafana to analyze the time series of orders and raise alerts. And actually, the source for Grafana in this case is Materialize. So Materialize allows us to find interesting patterns, whether they're good or bad, but we can catch them and then we can raise alerts. And those alerts, they can get to us on different mobile solutions, email, chats, and things like that. And we also have what we call business insight dashboarding, which is more like the analysis of performance in real time. And also the interface there is Materialize. So it's really cool because at the end of the day, Materialize is picked up by every other third-party tool we're using, whether we're analyzing just problematic orders or raising alerts, or whether we're looking at performance numbers. So, Materialize became central if you want to expose Kafka as just like any regular SQL database to all the downstream applications.
I love to hear that. Sorry to jump in because there's so many of the themes that I've been hearing, over episode after episode or episode of companies that are doing things really well to work with their customers. You mentioned something there which is the mecca for me is where I hear companies talk about is making the exact words you said are easing our lives. And that's the area where you've got a company there that's doing that, that's come in and you've got a problem that others have tried to mention and saying, right, how do we make this easier? The thing I think is really interesting is, and it's credit to you, Arjun, on doing this, and also to you, Jeff, about working with a business and saying, look, this is how we want to work with you, is where you can put two companies there that say, look, this isn't an out-of-the-box solution. We can work with you on this project. I've got a problem. Let's go out and utilize the expertise in various different areas and know what we're good at and what we're not good at, and say, how do we work this problem out together? And I think that's something which is really compelling and really powerful in terms of providing and, in my mind, making Kepler Cheuvreux stand out as a business there that's working with exciting technologies and embracing that technology to solve problems and make things better and easier and more productive. But then also for you, Arjun, to be a business there that's prepared to stop and listen and take the time to understand your customer rather than force a solution that doesn't necessarily, straight out the box do exactly what it wants to do. And I think that's a really compelling piece. that's my 2 pence worth. I'm going to let you get back on to where you were flying, Arjun.
No, I really enjoyed something, and I really sort of enjoyed many of our interactions with Jeff, where he mentions another tool that he's using, a tool that uses standard SQL to talk to Materialize, because one of the real powers of standard SQL is the ecosystem, right? Like SQL is a very mature technology, 3 decades, possibly longer. That's as far back as I know, but it might even go further back. Because there's no single company or vendor, no matter how large, that's been an expert in business intelligence and in alerting, in data integration, in data movement and databases. But what SQL really allows you to do is to do a very, very good job at the databases, which we are experts in at Materialize, but work very well with the best-in-class solutions for, say, BI and alerting, which it's never going to be in the same house, no matter how sophisticated, because the data ecosystem is absolutely massive. And there are specialized tools in every category that are perfect fits. And what you really want is to build software that works in a plug-and-play fashion with these best-in-class tools. So some of these tools that Jeff has mentioned to us over the few months, over many months, we didn't anticipate, and we were not the experts in choosing the right tool in that category. And if we had to build sort of custom solutions for alerting and BI, we're never going to do as good a job as, say, a vendor that is focused completely on business intelligence and alerting. And that's what I really like about standard SQL, and it's great to hear that has worked very well for Jeff.
Absolutely. Let's take this a little bit, a bit further about how this relationship continues. And so you guys have been working there and had some great results so far. What are the next phases, and how do you take this further forward?
So on my side, like what I envision is Materialize to act as a data enhancement, if you want, because we're in the process of preparing models which are like machine learning driven, and solving the problem of putting machine learning in production is difficult. That's a difficult problem, and typically, like all those models, they take an input which is already aggregated. It's very rare that they take raw events. So most of the time, events are bucketed in some way. For example, in time buckets. And again, like Materialize added like time aggregates quite recently. So we're thinking we're probably going to pre-aggregate data in Materialize, so that every like downstream model that feeds on aggregated data will point to the same data, so that the client code doesn't need to re-aggregate on the side. So I could have like 10 different models on a particular instrument if you want. And if I want to do like, I don't know, open, ILO, close, for example, or HLC aggregation on a time bucket basis, I only do it once, and it's defined in Materialize, and then it's broadcasted downstream through Kafka. It could be back into a Kafka topic, or it could be on a pool basis. But the point is, I only do it once. I do it in Materialize, so it's consistent across the set of all the applications I'm going to deploy. I think that's a major benefit of having this middle layer that guarantee the consistency of aggregation. So near term, that's an objective.
Friction reduction effectively there that we're talking about, isn't it? It's about making that whole process as smooth and easy as possible. And I think there's another theme that has been coming up over the last few phases of this conversation, is where we're talking about those innovative, bespoke, collaborative tools that can work together. You mentioned there the sort of third-party tools that can all piece together, where this isn't now about one enterprise legacy piece of technology that sort of stifles and dictates how you operate as a business. This is about nimble technology that is allowed to fuse together and act together and work with work to provide the real solution for the customer, which I love hearing about as well. Arjun, what about you? What's your view on how you can continue to add this great value to the business?
Well, we absolutely love working with Jeff. Jeff always comes to us out of the blue sometimes with a new problem that we have no idea how he even got himself in that solution in that space, and it's really enjoyable. It really pushes us to improve the product. Several of the features that we built, like we mentioned, motivated by problems that Jeff was having and trying to sort of analyze and join data in different ways across different systems. And one of those is also scale. So Jeff, I'd love to understand, and feel free to keep it brief or simple. So what scales of data are you talking about? How much data do you generate per day? Because
hundreds of millions of data points per day of rows, and each row probably have like 100 columns. So it's definitely it's starting to be not, I wouldn't say exactly big data on a per day basis, but it's a massive amount of data, and it typically breaks a regular database. Because initially we started with the most simple solution. We say, okay, let's put it into Postgres. Then it started to be a little bit shaky. So we try to be smart around indexing. So we use all the tools that we knew on how to optimize like Postgres for real time. But if you cannot do like bulk inserts, it just doesn't work. So Postgres is very good at ingesting massive amount of data if it's in bulks. But if you start doing like row by row, and we have no choice because we need events, and we need real time. So we can't just say, I'm going to take 1 second or 10 seconds to insert 1 million rows. It just doesn't work for us. So we tried evolutions of Postgres. There are tons of tools nowadays, but essentially they all break when we are around like 10,000 inserts per second. That's typically the frontier that we found. Kafka has no issue. Kafka, no problem. It's distributed. So, Kafka can take that pain. But downstream, being able to exploit that data is where Materialize really brought value for us. Yeah, it's just too fast. It's too much data too fast for regular tools.
And I imagine this rate of data is only growing over time as you bring in more sources or you add more algorithms and add more
absolutely, because in the beginning we had to restrict ourselves for resource constraint issues as well. But more and more, because Materialize is there, first of all, we know we don't need any downstream database, so we can save on this space. And yes, our main idea is like everything that happens should be logged. We see Kafka as like structured log, and we need to be able to do calculation on logs. That's schematically how I see things. Like anything that the algo does or doesn't do, that's also the thing. You need to log when something does not happen. You need to know why. So even if there's no event, you will create an event. You will say time has passed, it's an event, and then I write something. I write my state into Kafka. So obviously, if you start doing this, you're going to need more and more. Essentially, you're taking out data that normally gets into a file, a log file, you structure it, and you stream it. So obviously, I'm sure we're going to reach a billion data point very soon per day. Yeah, so it just keeps, it's going to keep growing. The beauty of Materialize is that also it scales. So, we can just increase the number of CPUs that are used on a per instance basis. We can increase RAM. And in terms of complexity, it remains one process for us. It's just one Docker container. It's just one line, and we start Materialize. We point it to Kafka, and we get the ball rolling. So, in terms of complexity, it's also very helpful for us.
This is a lovely story of sort of happy vendor, happy client, and it's great to sort of see it develop through and sort of witness this sort of loving as we see it developing. But it's based on a foundation of problems being solved and a company there that's clearly listening to to what the issues are and enjoying the challenge, very palpably enjoying the challenge of saying, look, let's find out and get involved in this and solve the problems for it. Jeff, can I ask you, from working with Arjun and the team, what have been the sort of top 2 or 3 things about that have made it such a great process for you?
I think the accessibility. So first of all, the tooling. So we're able to talk on Slack at any time. Sometime I ping them. It's 1 a.m. for me. Doesn't matter. We can exchange all day long. Next day the question is still there. Might have been answered overnight. So it's kind of like seamless in terms of communication. There's always someone around, almost at any point in time. Yeah. And also in terms of accessibility, the ability to to talk to high level like Arjun or Frank himself. I actually knew some of the work from Frank from before. I didn't know it was from him. I was familiar with underlying technologies like timely data flow, and I already heard about that. So it was very good as well to be able to exchange, ideas with Frank, not just like throw my problems at them, hoping they find some trick or some creative solutions, but also understand why is it that Materialize, is a revolution in some way, where it's coming from and why it's efficient. It's efficient because it knows how to schedule all those computation. It's not just taking every message from Kafka and put that into memory. No, it's smart in the way that it addresses the queries that you're throwing at it. And I think that explains the success of Materialize as well. So that's the two main things. Is the fact that you're able to talk to the people that have knowledge. I went to other product on Slack. I'm connected with like dozens of them. The problem is like there's a size effect as well. So some projects are very mature, and so I'm one out of 100,000 persons on Slack.
Yeah, exactly.
And I ask a question, and if you're lucky, someone from the community gives you an answer. But most of the time, my questions are very technical, and they don't get picked up. Because I know they have no answer anyway, or so I'm going to pinpoint like things that I know that don't work typically in distributed systems, like get me the last 10 observations or get me the last observation. That's difficult, and I just get no answer. So I think this is key. Actually, it's still human size, and you really talk to experts, and everyone on support. It's not just Frank, or it's every person I talk to. They're all knowledgeable. There is nobody that doesn't have a very high level of knowledge at Materialize. And that's, to me, that's really enjoyable, because I'm not going to lose time through, middlemen and, navigating through sales and until,
it's one of the big frustrations, isn't it? As tech companies grow,
yes.
that you sometimes lose that connectivity, and it's the classic consultancy model, isn't it? You speak to a partner during the sales process, and all of a sudden you're left with a graduate to implement the service.
Absolutely, yeah.
I love that piece, that with something as complex as this, you're talking to people who've got a genuine passion and ability to do that. Yeah. And again, if I look at the traits of great businesses, communication, and solid communication that saves frustration, and again, I come back to that whole point of reducing friction, which I think is so important in a vendor supplier relationship. It comes from real care and attention and passion, and you can see that just well, I hope everyone who's watching this at the moment can absolutely see that coming through the screen at the moment. Arjun, anything you want to wrap up with?
No, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's really fun to spend some time and step back with Jeff and chat. Obviously, chat with them extensively on text. It's nice to jump on video sometimes and have the larger perspective. We love working with Jeff, and as I mentioned, he's always pushing us. And one of the things I actually really enjoy about Jeff and a couple other of our financial customers is they're always pushing the limits. You come back and you say, hey, we've improved performance, and they're just going to eat that up and throw some more data at it and throw some more use cases at it, and then come back saying, well, when's the next bump in performance? We can throw more things at it, and that's really enjoyable to work on, because as technologists building a technology platform, these sources of fresh problems are a continual source of motivation and energy that we absolutely love. So thank you so much.
I think this has been brilliant, because for me, it's, as I say, it's the first time we've done one of these shows where a business who I've got so much respect for in Kepler Cheuvreux, who are very clearly innovating and trying new things and looking to invest in technology and showcase their capacity to work with new and exciting and fresh tech, and work with the companies to help them almost evolve their products as that continues as well, is really, really exciting. But also for you, Arjun, to be a business there that has obviously done such a great job for a customer that we almost want to evangelize about that and tell the story, to actually sit there and almost share the war stories as it's been going through and sit through this whole thing has been an absolute pleasure. So Jeff, Arjun, it's been absolutely brilliant to do it. I'm sure if people want to, watching this and want to find out a little bit more, you'd both be happy to expand on it alongside it. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you? I'll ask you first, Jeff.
I think they can reach me by email. Is probably the best way. at this stage, unless they join Materialize, and we can speak on Slack. Of course, if they're interested. No, but that's probably the best way. If they're interested in Materialize, I'm there anyway. So I'm sure they can reach out on Slack.
Absolutely, great stuff. And Arjun, what's the best way of getting in touch with you and hopefully finding more happy customers at the same time as well?
As Jeff mentioned, we have a wonderful community Slack. Just go to our website, www.materialize.com, and you should see a link right at the top to join our Slack community. And as Jeff mentioned, we're always hanging out in the Slack community. We love talking to users, prospective customers, and current customers. So we've been talking to Jeff for a while there, and it's always exciting to see fresh faces there as well. So we'd love to chat with you there and talk you through your problems or whatever the solution may be.
I think those that Slack community and prospects of looking at and opening up that sort of thing to have people working together to get the most out of everything, share together, I think is something which is genius, and I'm so pleased that that's sort of getting more and more traction as it moves further forward as well. Jeff, Arjun, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing that journey with us today in this pioneering episode of Fintech Focus TV. It's been really good fun. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have, and we will see you soon in another episode of Fintech Focus TV. Chaps, thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you so much, Toby.
Thank you.